thank you very much for joining this Food and Drink Tech Hub, supporting your journey to net zero webinar. My name is Alistair Trail, and I work for SAC Consulting, and we have been awarded the contract by Highlands and Highlands Enterprise to deliver the Food and Drink Tech Hub business support service. So for those who don't know, this project will provide business support, technical advice, and events to develop our existing and growing network of food and drink producers and supply chain businesses. So today's webinar is on supporting your journey to net zero. So I've got three fantastic speakers, hopefully if Ian can join, who will pass on their insights how you can reduce your carbon impact and move towards being a net zero business. Before I introduce these speakers, I'm very quickly just going to tell you a little bit about the business support service in case you're unaware of the work that we are doing. So the business support service is a 3-year project to work with over 300 food and drink businesses in the Highland Council area. That's from the whole supply chain, from farming all the way through to food service and retail and to giving to the consumer. So support, the project delivers the following support. So it's supporting businesses to develop their growth plans, so facilitating broker specialist and technical support, raise awareness and increase implementation of new technologies, and try and develop collaborations between businesses, but also between the public sector and academia to deliver that innovation and the projects that benefit the food and drink businesses, but also the wider food and drink sector. And also provide some insights into what businesses acquire from the physical food and drink tech hub, which is currently being commissioned to be built at Allness, where there's going to be a food and drink innovation centre there where businesses can collaborate and make use of development kitchens and meeting spaces, collaboration spaces, try and be a hub for food and drink development innovation in the region. So our project's going to look at a number of different things, delivering that through events and workshops and one-to-one support. So things like product development, prototype testing, scaling up, working in the packaging and product labeling, food safety, shelf life analysis, looking at sustainability, low carbon, waste management, and where this event today comes from, which is about net zero, offering us support on branding, marketing, business planning, e-commerce, and more technical stuff like equipment specification, troubleshooting, factory layout, and that type of thing. We have a website up and running, which is the Tech Hub, where you can get information about the services we supplied. You can register your interest. And we've also got a food and drink business bite podcast. So we've created 2 podcasts so far. They're now live on your usual platform for listening to podcasts, and the third one will be coming out in the next few days. So we deliver the support a number of ways. So you can register on the website, and then you can get a support call and signposting service where we can introduce you to other businesses and other organizations that can support your business to grow. We're doing technical and networking workshops, so be that face-to-face, online, and these webinars. We're doing insight and best practice, so creating videos, our podcasts I mentioned, and infographics. And then we're doing the main one-to-one support, which is innovation clinics, where you can speak to a panel of experts on a certain topic. Common interest groups. We've got our first 2 common interest groups up and running. One's for distillers and one's for businesses on the Black Isle. So if you're in any of these categories and you want to get involved, please let me know. Intensive one-to-one support, which is also started. There's 5 businesses at the moment getting 3 days of support from specialists in our team, but also we're subcontracted some of that advice and support for others that can come in and support the business. And also we're doing learning journeys, which we'll be organising one of them in the next year. So that's introduction to the project. So this is the plan for today, my introduction. Then I'll be passing on to Ian Clooney, who's the Net Zero Programme Director, the Scottish Food and Drink Partnership, who's going to introduce you to the topic and about the support that's available from government. And then we've got my colleague from SC Consulting, Sarah Urbanova, talking about the benefits of carbon audits and how they can be used to support your journey to net zero. And then we're going to have a case study from Nigel Tiddy, who is from Windswept Brewing, with a plan to finish around about 5 o'clock. So that is my introduction finished. I will now pass on to Ian Clooney, who hopefully is back in the room and can share his screen. We'll change the order then and we'll move on to our second speaker. So Sarah, I'll pass on to you, and you can maybe share your screen and do your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, let's see if I can do that. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Hi, yeah, so I'm Sarah. I work in the environment team of SAC Consulting, and I have been working with a handful of clients on carbon footprinting and greenhouse gas accounting and helping them basically develop targets for net zero. So on the first slide here, you can see a little graph, which is basically the visualization of your net zero journey. And over the next 15 minutes or so, I'd like to discuss how you get to this kind of visualization and to net zero by 2045. So so yeah, I'll just touch very briefly on the background and why do we need to become net zero, and then dive straight into greenhouse gases accounting and reporting, carbon footprint, emissions reduction plans, and pathway to net zero. On the slide here on the right, I've left here a little quote that I really like to keep in mind. It's a little bit, it's kind of my mantra when it comes to greenhouse gas accounting. It says, you cannot manage what you don't measure. And hopefully you find that true. You find it to be true. So a little bit about the background. You probably are aware of all of this, but I sometimes quite like to put things into context. So back in 2015, countries got together and signed the Paris Agreement, whereby they agreed to limit the global warming well below 2 degrees Celsius, and preferably to 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to the pre-industrial levels. The UK government then responded to the Paris Agreement by implementing their own net zero strategy, which aims to decarbonize all sectors of the UK economy to achieve net zero targets by 2050. So all sectors of the UK economy is the important bit here. So that's why obviously it concerns your businesses. And then the Scottish response to that is obviously the most important one for us, where the Scottish government aims to end our contribution to climate change by 2045. So basically become net zero by 2045, so 5 years before the UK. And the Scottish government also sets interim targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So one of them, for example, is to reduce the emissions by 75% by 2030. So moving on, net zero. What is net zero? Net zero emissions means reducing all greenhouse gas emissions to absolute minimum. And that's important. So it's not just quantifying your current emissions and then offsetting those, but first you need to reduce them to the absolute minimum. It's accepted there will always be residual emissions, but you need to make the best efforts to reduce them, and then you reabsorb the remaining emissions from the atmosphere by natural carbon sinks such as trees or peatlands. So you can invest into tree planting or, for example, peatland restoration. So why do we need to become net zero? There are already some mandatory emissions reporting schemes in place. They mostly concern larger companies, and I'm not sure, but some of your organizations might be already subject to this mandatory reporting. But many won't be. But as we described on the previous slide already, the net zero does include the entire UK economy. So we can assume that going forward, you will be asked and you will be required to report on greenhouse gas emissions. And an early adoption of greenhouse gas accounting can put your companies in advantageous positions. Also, there are other benefits for starting early. So most companies will realize some cost reduction of energy and resource use. You gain improved understanding of and the ability to respond to the risks of climate change. You can also increase your competitiveness and market leadership and gain new customers and business opportunities. I'm sure many of your businesses have already noticed the shift in customer demands and the fact that people want the businesses to respond to and commit to net zero. And same with businesses, they will be choosing suppliers and business partners based on their environmental credentials as well. So it really puts you in better position for your business, the sustainable economic sustainability of your business, really. And also it can help you reduce the legal and regulation risks. So as we said, we can assume that going forward, you will be required to report on greenhouse gas emissions and reduce them. So you will be less subject to the legal and regulation risks. Greenhouse gas accounting and reporting. The Greenhouse Gas Protocol, which is the most widely used international guidance, basically categorizes all the emissions into three scopes for simplifying the whole accounting. So the scope 1 are the direct emissions produced by activities controlled or owned by the organization. So basically the emissions that happen within your organization, such as the fuel that's used in your cars, it could be natural gas that you use for heating up buildings, or it could be petrol used in tools and like lawnmowers, for example. The scope 2 emissions are indirect emissions resulting from the use of electricity, heat, steam, or cooling. So for most companies, it'll be mostly electricity. And basically the assumption is that the electricity has been generated somewhere else, so the emissions happen at the power station, but your company uses the electricity and can control how much emissions has been generated through your own activity. And scope 3 emissions are by far the largest and include quite a lot of different aspects. So they are the other indirect emissions generated by sources or activities the organization does not own or control. So they include things like waste, for example, waste generation. So although you can control how much waste and what type of waste you generate, once it kind of leaves your site, you don't really have any control over how much emissions and what kind of emissions is generated through the waste treatment. Depending, obviously, you will have some level of control, but not a lot. Same for example, water use, water consumption. But other activities, this one includes is, for example, your supply chain. So purchasing and procurement and business partnership and contractors and business travel, for example. So now that you've categorized your emissions into 3 different scopes, you can start looking at your activities within the company and put them into the right scope, and you can start putting together your carbon footprint. So there's this little diagram kind of showing what the carbon footprint is. That basically is your activity that you've identified results in some emissions. So that could be the use of vehicles and heating up the buildings and lighting and the waste generated. And you can measure this activity usually, such as by measuring the liters of fuel or the meters cubed of gas that you use. So you've got the data for the activity, and then you apply the intensity or emissions factor to the activity. So emissions factors are allocated to each activity because each activity will result in different greenhouse gases, different amounts of greenhouse gases as well. And what you get at the end of it is the carbon dioxide equivalent. So the little E at the end starts for equivalent. And I would just like to explain here that when we talk about carbon footprint, carbon auditing, carbon inventories, sometimes we tend to think that it's only about carbon or carbon dioxide, but it's not. It actually includes all the 7 main greenhouse gases as defined by the Kyoto Protocol. But this is just for simplification. So basically what we are looking at is the global warming potential of each gas, and then translating it into the emissions factor. And just for simplifying the whole calculation, so the emissions factor actually for each activity will include the relevant greenhouse gases. So hopefully that makes sense. But I just wanted to kind of highlight that when we talk about carbon footprint, it's not just carbon, it is absolutely all the other greenhouse gases as defined by the Kyoto Protocol. So now we've got the footprint for our activities. We've identified how much emissions they release or they result in. So we can now start drafting our reduction plan. And again, we can look at the reduction plan in terms of the different scopes. So here, I just wanted to point out maybe that this is completely fictional, that these numbers, our activities are not based on any real business. This is just for illustration. So say this fictional organization has got mobile combustion, stationary combustion, and fugitive emissions, which result in some carbon footprint. And then now they can see where are the hotspots of the emissions and what they need to tackle first. And I've just listed some examples here that of initiatives and action that can be implemented to reduce the emissions. So, for example, you can replace your diesel vehicles with hybrid vehicles, and we have data on what's the potential reduction of emissions that could result from that. So you can start estimating how much emissions you could actually reduce by replacing your vehicles. The same with, for example, natural gas boiler. You can replace it with biogas boiler, and again, you can estimate how much emissions you can reduce through this action. And then you can also replace your current air conditioning equipment. So air conditioning equipment contains F-gases, which have a very high global warming potential, and quite often they leak from the units. So that can actually result in quite a big footprint, carbon footprint. So you might want to replace these units, for example, with climate-friendly gases, and you can reduce up to 100% emissions just from this activity. But obviously, this will all depend on your organization, on your capital availability, and you need to really build the reduction plan into your business planning as well, and see what can be achieved. But for this fictional organization, we can kind of predict that if they implemented these three initiatives, they could reduce the scope 1 emissions by 41% by 2030. And so you basically do this exercise for each scope. I've got an example here for scope 2 for this company. It was electricity consumption only, and they procure electricity, just standard electricity from the grid. So what you can do is they can purchase certified renewable electricity, which would result in 100% reduction. They could maybe install on renewables, so they could install solar panels or wind turbine, or a little hydro scheme maybe, because if there's this availability. But again, that obviously requires a lot of capital, these actions. So for some companies in the interim, before they raise the capital, they can look at improving the efficiency, or for example, replacing existing equipment with more efficient models, which can also result in some reductions of consumption and therefore emissions. What I find really helps and is quite useful is to have half-hourly meters or smart meters on site, not only for electricity, but for any other utilities, because that really allows you to look at your consumption and look at the peak demands and maybe where spikes occur, and just kind of review the whole consumption profile and see where you could bring the consumption down a little bit, because over time or over the period of a year, that can actually result in really good reductions. And the last one obviously is scope 3 emissions, and as I mentioned, they are the most complex ones, so that does tend to be quite a big exercise to look at where you could reduce your emissions. They also tend to be quite kind of the largest proportion of emissions for food and drink businesses. So they can be quite challenging. I'm not going to spend too much time here, but basically, for example, waste disposal and water use, that could be a little bit easier for companies to tackle first, because there are ways to reduce your waste. You can kind of shift on the waste hierarchy. You can shift your waste treatment up, so go towards reducing the waste and reusing, and etc. and so on and so on, and that helps you bring the emissions down. You can also change your waste contractors, you know, and go with a contractor that recycles the waste rather than landfills it. So there are different ways you can reduce the emissions here as well. And then for material use, so you know, usually the footprint comes from the use of ingredients, but also packaging, for example. So there you can identify within the supply chain where the emissions come from, and you know, can you shift to different supplier which has got lower carbon footprint, or can you maybe work with your existing suppliers and see if you can help them decrease their footprint, so that in turn decreases your own scope 3 emissions. So that's scope 3. So now you've done your footprint. You've completed the greenhouse gas inventory. So that's your footprint or carbon footprint. I call it different names, but it's still really the same thing. You've identified your emissions hotspots, so where the major sources of emissions come from, which activity. You've identified the measures, how to tackle these particular hotspots, and what kind of initiatives you need to come up with or implement in order to reduce the emissions. And now you can set reduction targets. So lately, Science-Based Targets initiative has been very popular with businesses to set their targets with, and quite often actually big retailers will require their suppliers to actually submit their science-based targets. There are many advantages. So the emissions reduction is actually aligned with the Paris Agreement. So there is a scientific approach to how much emissions you need to reduce in your business so that you stop contributing to the global warming by 2045 or 2050, or the target here which you set for your business. And they're also independently verified targets. So you know, that kind of avoids the greenwashing and just making sure that, you know, that definitely your targets and your footprint is credible and valid. So you can set your targets, and you can also set your draft your net zero plan and implement it. But this really is just the start of the journey. So from then on, you really need to monitor your activity on regular basis, at least annually. You need to monitor the changes in your emissions and see if you're tracking the progress. So checking whether you're actually on progress to net and on target to net zero, and seeing you start implementing your actions as well, and changes in your business, and making sure that they work, or if where they haven't worked, trying to identify and analyze why they haven't worked, and change the approach as well.
Just one minute, Sarah.
Just finishing. This is my last slide. So, well, that was full time. So, thank you, Alistair. So yeah, so this is that was very, very fast. I realized that very fast overview of what as a business, what you need to do to set your net zero targets. I just wanted to finish on kind of positive note, because I know that quite often people tend to blame businesses for the pollution and for the emissions, but I really think, you know, that there is massive opportunity for businesses to take the action and actually, you know, be, as said on the poster here, be part of the solution, not the pollution. And also there's a little quote from the head of the Philippines Climate Change Commission: if not us, then who? If not now, then when? So hopefully you find that a little bit inspirational, and that's me.
Thank you very much. That was great. Thank you. Now, I believe if you can stop sharing your screen, Sarah, I believe Ian is now made it on. Hi, Ian. How are you doing?
Hello, folks. How you doing? Sorry. Apologies. I've also given you some palpitations. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
One computer's crashed and another one's been wheeled out. So apologies to that, folks. Sorry for turning up late and messing up the running order. So am I in the driving seat now, Alistair?
Yeah, you can go and you can share your screen, or I've got your slides here if John and I did it, but if it works with you, you go ahead. Perfect.
You sharing that okay?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So, yeah, I'm Ian Clooney. Apologies for being late. Net Zero Programme Director at the Scotland Food and Drink Partnership, and we are hosted by the Food and Drink Federation Scotland. So Alistair asked me to come on and give you a wee bit of an overview. I caught a bit of what Sarah was saying there, so I'm hopefully going to dovetail nicely into some of the areas she was touching on. So I'm going to just talk about net zero and the food and drink industry and some of the challenges they're facing. So sort of bringing it back into what are we doing in Scotland. And then I'll come on to the second part of my presentation around the programme that I'm heading up and what's the practical support that's out there for food and drink businesses. So hopefully going to untangle some of the web that is net zero currently. So, yep. Everybody see that? Okay, brilliant. I can. That's a start. So, question being the headline question: Scottish food and drink a sustainable future. And next slide, please, Alistair. Simple answer is yes, thankfully. But I put a graphic up there which illustrates that we need both economic sustainability and environmental sustainability. We can't have, as we move forward as an industry, we can't have one without the other. They are mutually hand in hand. They require each other to survive. So moving forward, food and drink businesses will be required to reduce their impact on the environment. As Sarah touched on, retailers are ramping up their ask of food and drink suppliers, and I'll touch on that a bit later on when I talk about the programme specifically. But to be able to invest in climate-ready solutions and reducing their impact on the environment, food and drink businesses have to be environmentally and economically sustainable. They require the economics to deliver the environment. We know what the challenges of food and drink businesses had over the last number of years. We've had Brexit, we've had a pandemic, we've got geopolitical challenges in the east of Europe, and we've got swathes and swathes of challenges every single day, the cost of living crisis that we're currently working our way through. So there's a number of challenges businesses are facing, but a resounding yes, there is a sustainable future for the food and drink business, but we need to deliver on both of these elements. Next slide, please, Alistair. So net zero is complicated. Programme I've been running has been running since July when I joined, and prior to that I was with Zero Waste Scotland for 6 years working on the food waste fight. When we talk to people, predominantly the first thing they would say is net zero, it's complicated. Sarah's slide gave us a really good breakdown of some of those practical actions, getting a baseline, setting a target. But actually the day-to-day business, all of the challenges that food and drink businesses that are facing, just that I've outlined, on a day-to-day basis, it is incredibly difficult for them to lift their gaze, lift their focus, and be able to drive forward a net zero delivery plan. So it's complicated, or is it? Next slide, please, Alistair. So if we have a think about the support landscape, so businesses that are on the call right now, and businesses I and everyone else on this call engages with, have those daily challenges. But right now in net zero, there's an awful lot going on, which is good and challenging at the same time. It's good that there's so many organisations, over 200 in Scotland, who offer over 145 offers of net zero support. So there's a busy landscape out there. Which is the right offer for me and who are the right people to engage with? So there's a challenge. There's more than 50 lenders, and that's up quite significantly only in the last couple of years. So mainstream banks had some offers around net zero and the green agenda for a few years, but there's now an awful lot more specific lenders who are looking to support your business or businesses with cash, with loans. But again, which is the best one? Really challenging to try and unpick. Without the knowledge, without the understanding, without the specific subject-specific matter, it's really difficult for businesses that deliver shortbread, make whiskey, distill gin. That's their day job. That's what they do. And what we need to do is try and unclutter this landscape, bring clarity where we can. And just a cursory glance in the month of April across Scotland, now this is UK-wide, this one, there was over 75 events this month alone that you could have dialed into or attended that had a focus on net zero. So in summary, a very busy landscape. Next slide, please, Alistair. So just sort of following on from Sarah as well, just showing some of the complication. If I'm making shortbread, I'm distilling gin, and I look at some of these slides, and this is a fairly simplified one, I quite like it, upstream activities, downstream activities, reporting company. It does highlight clearly, nice visual, that these are some of the things that we're talking about. But again, if it isn't my day job, how do I cope with this? How do I unpick this? How do I know what the best thing to do is, or what's the right thing to do? What's the next step? So next slide, please, Alistair. So yeah, if we're quoting, and I like the one on Sarah's slides, but if I quote a Chinese philosopher, every journey starts with a single step. So if we haven't taken those first steps, and here's just some areas I'm going to outline, these are the sort of things we should be focusing on: to declutter, to clarify, to bring forward those first steps, those clear, defined steps that every business should be taking, every food and drink business in Scotland should be taking. There are free energy audits for every single SME in Scotland through Energy Efficient Scotland. An absolute basic is, as Sarah was touching on, half-an-hour meter readings, getting to understand where you are on energy. That's just a win straight away. So some of that basic housekeeping, step one, let's get things like that done. If you have had an audit, I will say, and I ran one SME for 4 years, many people came in and gave me audits or gave me support, but it's actually implementing that. It's great that you have an audit. The government and taxpayers paid for that. Let's make sense and actually deliver on that, actually complete that audit. Let's, the recommendations that are made, follow through on them. There's a very good tool, findbusinesssupport.gov.scot. So that supports all of that. You'll find, I beg your pardon, all of the support that's available across the government. So that's local agencies, there's local government in there, there's other providers who are supported by government funding. So there's an awful lot in there. The challenge being, again, I would accept that if you put in net zero and you put in food and drink, you're going to get quite a lot of offers. So it's difficult to unpick that. But I'll come on to some of the practical help that we can give shortly. And again, back to what we touched on, Sarah was touching on, about those basic measurement tools. The enterprise agencies all have them, but there are many other providers of real basic measuring tools. So we want to understand where you are. So where are you in the journey right now? So net zero is a journey, and it is a small set of steps. There's targets of 2045 for a reason, is because we're not going to be net zero tomorrow or anytime soon. Everybody understands that this is a journey. We must all take action. We must take action bigger and better and faster. We must implement quicker and harder and faster. But we do need to understand where we're at to be able to take those steps forward. Another thing that really key for me is involving your team. Develop your team. The skills across the food and drink industry on the net zero agenda are low. They are low. We have a number of consultants who come in and support us. We have a number of enterprise agencies, again, as we have local authorities. But as a rule, and I'm being broad brush, as a rule, the green skills and the understanding of the net zero journey and even wider sustainability challenges is pretty low in food and drink. We need to try and develop our people. We're not going to suddenly have a tap of young, keen graduates coming out of university that's going to solve all our problems. We're just not there. We're competing in a global market. We're also competing with a lot of other industries who are facing the exact same challenges to deliver net zero by 2045, along with Scotland's target, in line with Scotland's target, beg your pardon. So we need to develop people within the industry. And the bottom line is we've got lots and lots of fantastic people in this industry, incredibly resilient, incredibly knowledgeable, incredibly passionate. So we have the base of developing a wonderful net zero and sustainability team across Scotland. And I'll come on to collaboration in a minute, but I'll use the C word for the first time. We must collaborate. We must, across industry, across subsectors, across sectors, across regions. We must, because otherwise the industry isn't going to survive on its own. Next slide, please, Alistair. So back to the Rubik's Cube. Many people, probably I find it quite complicated. Many people in the call me have found these quite easy to resolve. But I put it up earlier where it was a bit of a jumble, I beg your pardon, and now I've put up it's resolved. So is it complicated or is it? It is complicated, but we need to break it down into manageable chunks. We need to reduce it down to its component parts. And what I've just highlighted there is some of the areas that we need to look at. So some of that basic housekeeping, your energy audit, going on findbusinesssupport.gov.scot, some of those basic, reach out and collaborate with all of the support that's out there. As I highlighted, it is a blessing and a challenge that there's over 200 organisations with over 145 offers for net zero that food and drink companies in Scotland can tap into. But there is support there, so you don't have to suffer alone, and you don't have to sit there believing that it's complicated alone. There are many, many support out there. There's many people, individuals, organisations that can help you on this journey. And back to the point, It is a journey. We must take those initial steps. Next slide, please, Alistair. So if I come on to the partnership and bring it back into the context of the programme that I head up. So at COP26 in November 21, Scotland Food and Drink, along with a lot of organisations, made a commitment, made a pledge. COP was in Glasgow, the eyes of the world, the eyes of the environmental world were on Glasgow, and it felt like the right time to make those commitments. So the organisations on the screen that you see came together and made a commitment that they would deliver on and support the Scottish Government in delivering those net zero targets for 2045. Scotland Food and Drink is an absolute vital part of the economy. The government recognise that, and we should always use that as a power that for change of policy, for pushing back on areas that we believe require attention. The Scotland Food and Drink industry is an incredibly important part of industry, the economy, both rural, incredibly important rural, and for urban as well. So the 19 organisations on the screen represent not the entirety of the industry, but a very strong part of the industry. There are some organisations, some areas that aren't fully represented, but the vast majority of the Scotland Food and Drink supply chain is represented by the organisations there. Critical. The government's obviously on it, and as I've highlighted, the 3 enterprise agencies are also there as well. So the power of the collective, the ability to come together and for a common goal and access and leverage all of these great minds and great people in these organisations and members. If you obviously have a look, the vast majority are member organisations, so they are there to support their members down and across Scotland in various locations and various sizes. And as we know, when we touch on support and representing the industry, 98.8% of Scotland's food and drink businesses are small, i.e. under 49 employees. So I'm back to when I was saying about net zero needing to become part of the day job. There is a challenge, we accept that, and we all need to accept that that is a real challenge for somebody that's running. The vast majority of people we speak to are running small, so less than 49 employees. They have the day job to get on with. They have the day-to-day challenges. That's before we add in the Ukraine situation, the cost of living crisis, restructuring and coming fully out of the pandemic challenges that we faced. And then obviously the ongoing challenges with Brexit and the ability to trade in certain places. So it is a significant challenge and it's not to be underestimated, but back to my point a moment ago, we need to break it down to its component parts, bring it down to sizable chunks, small bite-sized chunks for all of these businesses. So next slide, please, Alistair. So 5 pillars, the partnership that the 19 organisations came together on decided on 5 pillars, and it makes perfect sense, and I'll run through them. So we will put net zero at the heart of our sector strategies. So all of those 19 organisations, particularly those membership bodies, have come together, and almost all of them have either a fairly well developed strategy or a plan to deliver on net zero. So they have all placed net zero at the heart of their strategies. I come across top right, we make net zero a just transition. Incredibly challenging, but we must make sure that we take all parts of the country and all parts of the industry with us. No area or part of our sector should be left behind. We'll tackle our shared challenges through collaboration, back to the C word again, vital. The power of the collective is brought to bear. And the last 2 there, I'll use data as an example of some of the success that we've had around mapping, and I'll come on to that in a minute. But data, we remain data poor on the net zero challenge. We remain struggling to get the correct data at the correct volume. And finally, in the centre, we'll support Scotland's food and drink businesses in the net zero journey. That's what we must deliver on. It's vital that we have support one-to-one and one-to-many, that we actually help businesses on the journey, because as I say, this isn't the day job for a lot of these businesses. This is not what they do day in, day out. It will need to become part of the day job, but right now it's a challenge. Next slide, please, Alistair. So some of the successes, I'll go very quickly here, is refrigeration project in the Northeast, led by a colleague up at One, where we looked at refrigeration and the challenges that refrigeration produces, whether it be gas, whether it be the transportation. So we've developed a really good project there, and those learnings will be out very soon. We also worked with a number of different organisations in Going with the Grain, Scottish Whisky Association, NFUS, and others, where we're looking at reducing the impact of fertilisers on malting barley for the whisky industry. Business support, we continue to support many businesses one-to-one and a number on one-to-many, so sector-specific or sub-sector specific projects, where we'll go in, we'll work with, and a consultant goes in and supports them one-to-one. We're obviously looking to draw the learnings so we can share with the rest of the industry. We don't have time, we don't have the ability, and we don't have the available cash, to be brutally honest, as a nation, to go in and support every single business one-to-one with a consultant holding the hand. We must learn and learn quickly, and back to my point, being bigger, better and faster, we must learn the challenges, we must learn the solutions, and then share widely so other people can adopt these solutions. And we've had a delivery group stand up. So we have the 19 trade bodies, the 19 bodies, I beg your pardon, around the table, have brought individuals forward onto delivery group, where we're now developing projects, again, collaboratively using the power of the partnership to deliver more impactful projects across the Scottish food and drink supply chain. And lastly, we've been mapping. We were set the rather large task by Scottish Government when we started the project that could we understand the carbon footprint of the Scotland food and drink industry. Obviously, my first answer was, you must be joking. My second answer was, that'll take a wee bit of time. So we're developing and we're working on that, and we're starting a mapping tool that will ask the 19 different organisations, particularly member organisations with businesses within their organisation, to start inputting data. And that should be in the summertime when we start inputting that, and we start developing at least a map, a whole supply chain, a whole industry picture of what the carbon footprint is of the industry. And a monumental task, but we've taken, again, back to the journey, we've taken those initial steps. Next slide, Alistair. And finally, I'll wrap up. What do we need to do? What's the ask? Well, we need to accelerate. There isn't a huge amount going on in the net zero world in the Scotland food and drink industry. There's a huge amount of great examples of businesses that are taking action and moving quickly, but we need to accelerate a lot more businesses on that journey to move quickly and at pace and at scale. We need to innovate. We need to be ready to take risks. We need to be ready to accept challenges, and we need to try things. You learn more in your life from your mistakes than your successes. That's proven from when you were a baby. So we need to innovate. We need to try different things, not be afraid to risk, take some risk, calculated risks, correct risks for the scale of business and size of business, but we do need to be innovative. We need to collaborate. I've used the word numerous times already. We need to collaborate. Individual pockets of businesses, individual businesses alone, and even sectors will not succeed in the net zero journey. We won't deliver as an industry on our goals and on the Scottish Government goals and the goals that we all want without collaborating. So we need to come forward in meaningful collaboration with impact and working together. And finally, I like the word disrupt. We need to be disruptive. The status quo is not an option. Continuing to do business as we have done for the last X amount of years is not an option. We do need to change the business model. Net zero will and has to become part of the day job, different for different size of business, but it must be part. So therefore, for me, it's disruptive. So it's disruptive collaboration. So we're spending time talking to each other, we're innovating, we're doing it quickly and at scale to accelerate, but we must disrupt. We must look at businesses and processes and supply chains and realize we need to take a different approach to a number of things that we're doing right now. And then, hopefully, and there's no reason, we can have a sustainable future, both economic and environmental, for the Scotland food and drink industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ian. Thank you. Great overview of what's happening at government level and what support is available for businesses as well, and some advice there. So certainly recommend getting an audit if you can with the organisations that you mentioned there. So thank you very much. So the final presentation today is going to come from Nigel, who's going to give a practical overview of a business that's down the journey of trying to go to net zero. So he's going to talk about his Windswept Brewing and the good work that he's been doing there. So over to you, Nigel. I will share my screen again.
Excellent. Okay, so sorry about the technical faff there, everyone. My name's Nigel Tiddy at Windswept Brewing Company. Bit of background: we're a small brewing craft brewery in Lossiemouth, on the north coast of Scotland. Here, and when I say small, we are significantly smaller than the 49. We've got 8 employees. We produce just under 2,000 hectolitres of beer a year, which is I saw Sam from Cairngorm, a lot less than they're doing. And we've basically been on a little bit of a journey. We started in 2012, myself and my business colleague. It's not clicking across. Try that. Okay. Self and my business colleague Al there. We started in 2012. Al actually isn't in the business anymore, but from the start we've been keen to work with the environment. One of the main reasons that we wanted to start the brewery here is because of the great environment we live in, and we like our outdoor activities. Particularly enjoy a beer around a campfire at the end of it, hence our strapline. And part of that has always been how we live within the environment and build a business within the environment. And of course, you can see from the bar there, so right from the start, that's our little tap room. And we've tried to use and reuse things. So that bar is pretty much built from pallets. We use old barrels that we get from local distilleries. So it's sort of been at the core of what we do. But as a small business, it's difficult, as Ian was saying. You know, you're so wound up in the middle of everything you do that it's hard to really focus on these things. And certainly for us, I think energy-wise, it was about 5 or 6 years ago. I found searching in, I don't know whether this is still true, but 55 to 60% of energy in the UK is used by small business. So while we all think it's the big company's job to save energy and do that sort of thing, actually we have an intrinsic responsibility, because if we don't do anything, there's still an awful lot of energy being used. So how have we sort of started looking at this? Well, the good thing about being small is I think it means you're fairly agile, so you can react to things quite quickly. Bad thing is you don't have much money, and certainly where we are in a rented site, we don't have any space really to implement things. So that gives us a challenge. Bringing the workforce along is easy because there's not many of them, but it restricts you because you don't have so much time with everyone working so hard to develop the initiatives that you'd like to drive forward. For us, one of the big things we've looked at, and I've learned something, Sarah, just to prove I was listening. Scope 3 is barley market and where we get our grain from, and what impact that has on our carbon footprint and our ability to drive to net zero. And that was really in 2018 the first thing we looked at with our Field to Firkin project. It was funded by Moray Leader and the local area group here in Moray. It was a joint collaboration with a Belgian local action group, who in Belgium, they produce a lot of beer. Only 3% of the barley used in beer in Belgium is grown in Belgium. So they were really looking at how, wants to understand more about barley and growth. We clearly, in Moray here, we have a huge amount of barley being grown. What we wanted to look at Windswept is how actually we can prevent this barley going miles away to get malted and milled and then brought back up to us. And can we not go straight to the farmer and buy from them? So we did. The guys from Belgium came over. We had a nice visit with those. That's our little patch of barley. We got 4 tons of barley grown in a local field to our specific specification. With the Picaveny estate. That's Martin there on the right hand side, chatting to the guys, the farmer. We looked at local ingredients. We actually used elderflower, which we plucked off the trees ourselves. We did a bit of sightseeing as well. And we went to Balvenie to look at their maltings. We were hoping to use their maltings. They're nice and local, so the barley wouldn't have to go far. Trying to see if it was possible in a small scale to keep your transport down and reduce that carbon impact. Unfortunately, the powers that be at William Grant wouldn't let us use their nice malting, so we had to go down to Fife to a place called Crafty Maltsters, and that's their shiny kit down there, where we got the grain malted actually in 2020, in March 2020, just as lockdown was happening, but we did manage to get a beer brewed. We also in 2019 managed a sneaky little trip to Belgium, which was an important, clearly a very important part of the whole thing, to see how they were producing their beers. And we produced a beer called Pioneer, which was an elderflower based beer with the grain that had been produced pretty locally, not quite as locally as we'd hoped, with minimizing the carbon footprint of it. And so the project was a success from that point of view, but then sort of COVID happened, and that engagement with business and with local farms and things became very difficult for a little while, and we're sort of really just gradually coming back to that now. We recently actually started engaging with a local farm. They have a very forward-thinking way of doing everything. They're looking at mixed crops. They produce barley through mixed crops with peas and things. So nitrogen fixing, reducing fertilizer, they're minimizing their ploughing, all of these things which will reduce the carbon impact, carbon release, and the impact on the environment. So we're keen to try and work with those, and we're looking to work with them over the next year or so to see if we can develop this. And the slight issue we have is all the local maltings will malt 50 tons at a time. Well, we don't need 50 tons at a time, so that's a bit of an issue. So possibly looking at creating our own maltings or engaging with other people who might want to do something similar. So we have aspiration. We know it'll make a difference. Well, Sarah, we've just recently started doing more look at our overall sort of more of an accurate audit and getting better data on our CO2 impacts, which we'll have to do more accurate work, I think, with the Field to Firkin project. But I know we can push forward with that, and we're quite keen to move on. The other project we're running, which is running right now, we're about a year into it, is a knowledge transfer partnership. Knowledge transfer partnerships are collaborations between business, education, in our case, University of Highlands and Islands. It's funded by Innovate UK, which is a sort of UK-based funding body, and it's administered by the North of Scotland KTP Centre for us, and they've been brilliant, very easy to apply for your funding. They're very helpful, and they help the administration of it. What you get is, in effect, a project and you get someone to run it. So Chisholm is our associate. He actually works with UHI on our behalf, in effect, looking at all aspects of the brewery, and we are basically looking at our energy and CO2 impact throughout, and that's right from bottles being produced all the way through to product being delivered, and the energy and waste impacts around all of that. And Chisholm's doing a great job there. He has some help. So through UHI, he's got 5 academic experts in various fields who support him and guide him, and are helping us to develop what we do. We're just heavily into the wastewater part of it now. We've done a lot of the energy, but it's sort of a lot of things are sort of rolling on. The energy stuff has been done. UHI give us a lot of support in other areas as well, and clearly guidance and support from the KTP North of Scotland team. So what are we really trying to do is to look at technology that we can use on our site. We're a small brewery, we have limited resources, it's a very small site. What can we fit in? You see all these big breweries and they've got biodigesters and everything that they can put their waste into, and it produces electricity. Well, we haven't got room for that. So really we're looking at how do we shrink down all of these things? Is it possible to shrink down these things? Is there technology where we can maybe, if not create, use sort of advances at the academic level to see if we can reduce our impact and use the resources we have on this small site, which is difficult. and that is the thing about being a small business. It's largely about size, time, and money, and that's what we're trying to understand more about and develop. One thing that we've some couple of relatively quick fixes. We put a cold liquor tank in, and this is more about reporting and data really than we were going to put a cold liquor tank in anyway. Although we were incentivized by some of the numbers that Chisholm came up with to get on with it a bit quicker. We sort of had it generally in place because we'd always just used mains water before. Basically, we think that it's reduced our annual water consumption by at least 5%, and that's an initial look at it over a relatively short period. We'll look at it again this year, but that's not insignificant. You know, we're at a relatively small scale. 5% over a larger scale is huge. So that's been a win. It's been a win on time as well because it's reduced transfer times and done all sorts of other things for us, which has allowed us to be more productive. And the other really big impact, so we're looking at our CO2 impact, and Chisholm did a lot of work of that and came up with this is how much CO2 we produced, and by far the biggest part of it was from fermentation. And we've known that we produce a lot of CO2 through fermentation. The problem is that collecting it, well, it's a massive bit of kit, or it always has been. Big bit of kit. Which if you've got the space, it's great and expensive. Clearly we didn't. But there is now just come onto the market a new piece of equipment, which was serendipitous, you might say, managed to find it. But basically it's relatively small, it's not too expensive, and there is help out there, as Ian was saying. You know, there is help and there's funding out there, and there's the ability for us, we think, to manage this. And because of the way we do certain other things, we actually crop nitrogen as part of our system in order to use nitrogen to push beer around the brewery. And well, if we don't need to use that equipment, then that saves us money. We're not buying CO2, that saves us money. There may even be potential for us to sell some of the CO2 we have in excess. And we think payback time of 3.5 years, which even for a small business like us, pretty good payback, and seems like a bit of a no-brainer. So that's the really big thing, though. Two big things, and as Sarah was saying, the collection of data that Chisholm has been able to do, and that time he's been able to give to it, and the due diligence that he's put there has allowed us to really quantify these things, and we wouldn't have been able to do that otherwise. So in conclusion, I've sort of rattled through that. But yet, net zero is important for small business as it is for the big guys. But it is hard for us. When you're small, you've got limited resources, space, and time. Although we're fortunate in that we can react quite quickly. But there's help, and because Ian and Sarah both said, our principle is it doesn't really matter how small you are, you're still going to have an impact, and it's important to try and do something. Although 2045, I think many small businesses are just hoping they'll still be around. But clearly we need to have a bigger think on that, and we want to be around, and we want to be having a positive impact. There is lots of help. HIE, Zero Waste Scotland, the KTP for us, Energy Saving Trust, clearly the SAC, and there are lots of other organisations that will help and guide. I think as a small business, and I've been shouting, there's almost too many. And having that central place where you can look to find the right people to work with, which Ian mentioned, I think is a really big step forward. It'll make it so much easier for small businesses to be able to find the right help and set them off in the right direction. And I think that is me. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you very much, Nigel. That was great. Great to see what a small business can do. Thank you for that. We've overrun slightly. Apologies for that. Technical issues caused most of the damage. Do we have any questions? There's a couple of minutes. If anyone's got any questions, please just take yourself off mute and ask now, if you do. Okay, no problem. If you do have any questions, please just email me and I can pass them questions on to our speakers and take it from there. So if you do have, please let me know. Just as we're overall, very quickly, just finish off. I'll just a couple of slides, and then we'll let you go. So if you just bear with me 2 seconds, I will share my screen again. So yeah, thank you very much for joining today. There is some other activity happening with the business support service. We are having a packaging clinic on Tuesday, the 9th of May. So if you're interested in having a one-to-one session, this is a 20-minute session with a panel of packaging experts to talk about anything to do with your packaging, about how best packaging suits your product, where you can get that packaging from, biodegradable packaging, recycling of your packaging. If you've got questions about DRS, packaging design, labeling, how that influences consumer behavior, this is really the session for you. There's 6 sessions of 6 spots available. So if you're interested in one of those, I'd ask you to register now. You can scan that QR code and that will give you information about how you can register for a space. There is going to be some questions in that form about your business, your packaging needs, and so forth. So please have some information about what specifically you want to talk about, because the panel will do some research beforehand and then speak to you for 20 minutes and hopefully give you some advice that you can take forward and implement in your business. Highlands Enterprise wanted to mention these organisations that can help on your net zero journey. The first one is Extend, which is supporting your net zero journey. So they offer tools to support. It's free to SMEs until the end of June, and you can go on their website there and get some extra information. They can help by raising awareness of net zero in the context of your business, and analysis of your business situation, your manufacturing process, advice and design, process revisions to reduce carbon, and they connect you with experts as well. So that's an organisation there that's offering free advice to SMEs until end of June. And also there's also SMAS, the Scottish Manufacturing Advisory Service, that offer free manufacturing views to SMEs. So businesses looking for improvements to reduce carbon and to make changes on the road to net zero, then these, again, the great organisation you can get support from. Certainly recommend you speak to them. Also, I'd like to just mention again that we have our podcast, which I'm very proud of. My colleague Kerry is the host, and we've done 2 podcasts already, which is Food and Drink Business Bites. So the first episode is me talking about the programme, but we've also got interviews with businesses that have used the support. And the 3rd episode will be going live at the end of the month, which is about the physical tech hub and the facilities that are available in the development kitchens, the networking spaces, the collaboration area. So be certainly grateful if you could have a listen to them. I think they're very good, but I'm biased, and you can get them on your usual platforms. And also, if you could, that's the QR code there. If you want to listen to them, take you straight to the podcast. You can scan there. And there's also a feedback form. I would be delighted if you could complete that form. It'll just take a couple of minutes. Give us some feedback about what we did well, what could be improved on, other areas of events we could be having in the future. Again, there's a QR code there. You can scan with your phones and get straight into it. So that's the event today. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'd like to thank our speakers, Ian. Thanks for joining us eventually. Thank you. Sarah, and to Nigel for a great presentation. Those 3, thank you very much. It was very, very interesting and exactly what I wanted to hear about the advice and support. And you don't have to be a big business to do this. It's, as Nigel could show, if you're a small business and you're looking to implement some savings, but it's the net zero journey. It's all about try to save money, make improvements as well, and make your business more sustainable in the future. So hopefully these were interesting presentations and some things you can take away and implement yourself. So thanks to the speakers. Thank you very much for joining us today. And I'd say I'll be emailing out probably later today or tomorrow with the copy of the slides and the feedback form. So if you can complete that, I have recorded this as well, and that recording will be made available on the website, the TechHUB website, for anybody who missed it today or if you want to watch again. So thank you very much, and hope you have enjoyed the rest of your evening. Thank you.